I also think that a capsule wardrobe is probably another way that the wealthy cosplay like lower income, because having a capsule wardrobe is just having less. Like, where are you putting the rest of your wardrobe in your house? You're really not getting rid of that stuff. I think it's just another ploy, kind of like Marie Kondoing, where it positions itself as like anti-consumption, but it is part of the consumption cycle. It's like you need to declutter so you can make room for more shit later. So I think a capsule wardrobe is like a really good idea in theory, but I think it doesn't make sense in like our current culture because advertising doesn't end. You're always going to be exposed to desire. And so when you think you're done, you're never done.
Welcome, welcome to Stan, the podcast where we dissect our enthusiastic and at times obsessive relationships with cultural phenomena. I mean, have you ever caught yourself unironically insisting that it's not just a phase? Or stayed up all night to finish that book that you just can't put down? Or have you ever had such a huge crush on a celebrity that it made your heart physically ache? I have. So join me as we figure out why certain things or people capture our attention and affection so well. I'm really happy that you're here.
I am still reeling that this conversation happened. As we all do, I've been secretly following this influencer's post for a long time. She puts out these really shrewd cultural analyses and makes so many good points. She introduced me to the word gorpcore. For those of you who, like me, were unfamiliar, it's the idea of people using functional outdoor wear as streetwear. So, have you ever wondered why you're walking through central London and everyone's wearing Solomon trainers and Arc'teryx beanies? That's Gorpcore. She has put out some really thoughtful dissections of tech and trends and style and how they reflect the desires and the aspirations of our cultural moment. Her name is Jayne Kitchen, but she goes by the handle of Dido Riot. And I reached out to her to ask whether she'd even consider coming on, and she was so lovely and receptive. And within hours, we were shuttling ideas back and forth, trying to come up with the perfect episode structure. As soon as she mentioned the row, I knew she was onto something. If you've never heard of it before, let me take you on a little journey. Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen were born in 1986, and only 9 months later, they were put to work on the set of Full House, which is an 80s sitcom. When they were 6, they launched Dual Star, an entertainment company that not only produced movies, but also sold clothes and books and other merch. As tweens and teens, they continue to make movies, playing themselves as characters. If you're wondering, they are ripe for a rewatch at your next girly sleepover. And I remember just thinking they were the coolest, prettiest, funniest, bravest, most interesting people on earth. And their style was also just the moment. At 20, they launched their own fashion brand called The Row. And when they announced they were launching The Row, they spoke about their intentions to remain behind the scenes. Weirdly, they still live in the public imagination so clearly. It might be because of their overexposure as teens, but it might also be that every time we catch a glimpse of them, it's somehow always so fucking chic. Within moments of Jayne's suggestion, we were sending each other pictures of the girls squatting on the sidewalks of New York Soho, but they somehow look incredible whilst doing it. When I'm trying to get over my crippling anxiety, I constantly try to manifest being as unbothered as Ashley Olsen, walking through the woods with a drink and a machete. This was a video that she released on her Instagram story during COVID. It was only a few seconds long, but people were so obsessed with this small look into this girl's life that the New York Times wrote an entire article about it. To be fair, it was in 2021, so mid-COVID, not too much was going on. I'm not a fashion girly by any stretch of the imagination, as you can probably tell. So it's hard to come up with an original, well-informed opinion on the row. But from my research, I know that the row is known for high quality, the association with the larger artistic world, incorporating interior designers and artists into their stores and marketing campaigns. Speaking of marketing campaigns, they don't really approach it traditionally. Their social media is just a curated page of their art inspiration. Their fashion shows are very small and you're not allowed phones, and you don't really see the row being advertised. It's very word of mouth, which contributes to this kind of if you know vibe that they're going for. There have been controversies over the price tags of their clothes. Plain white t-shirts that are $550 or plain back turtlenecks that will run you up $1,570. Obviously, it's a very exclusive look that they're going for. One thing I did want to mention that I found kind of creepy when I looked into it is that a lot of this stuff completely evangelizes their work. They do have a lot of stands insofar as the Business of Fashion released an article that I think accurately talked about them as teen stars, and people came for the author in the comments, saying it was completely unfair that they'd cast away that title and that they had really proved themselves in the fashion world. Also, every single article I read, or let's be honest, YouTube summary I watched, was just 10 minutes at least about how these girls are actually geniuses. In 2024, it was reported that the row raised over $1 billion of investment in their most recent round of fundraising. And that included money from big names such as the Wertheimers, who own Chanel, and Francois Bettencourt Meyers, who is the heir to the L'Oreal. I almost said kingdom. Who is the heir to the L'Oreal business. Sorry for butchering those names. I told you, I'm not a fashion girly. All of this seems emblematic of so many things. The cult of personality making business enterprises too big to fail, the obsession with quiet luxury, and the imminent downfall, in my opinion, of rich talk. Not personal. I'm sure you're great, but I'm looking at you, Becca Bloom. The ethics of child stardom, the idea of self-commodification, and parasocial relationships based on aspiration. As I've mentioned already, I think Jayne Kitchen, aka Dido Riot, is so cool and interesting and smart, and it was such a privilege to speak to her in this way. So I hope you enjoy and share the excitement that I did when I filmed this.
Thank you so much for coming on here and talking to me. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Jayne. My online handle is Dido Riot. I make videos about culture, technology, fashion, style.
First of all, as I already said before we started recording, like, I didn't think you were going to be so down. But you mentioned the row and the Olsen sisters, and I'm really excited to get into it, but I didn't know too much about it. Then I started watching a bunch of YouTube videos last night, and there is a wealth of content that is evangelizing about the Olsen twins in a very creepy way. There seems to be no criticism of them online that I've gotten into, so I'm very excited to hear from someone who seems a little bit more grounded. When did you first encounter the row as a brand?
I first encountered it online, I think more when it was like a novelty, like the Olsen twins have a fashion brand and not like, oh, did you know this fashion brand is owned by the Olsen twins? Like it was very much their name came first ahead of the conversation of the brand itself. Whereas now I think that a lot of younger women in particular may have heard of the row and are loosely familiar with the Olsen twins because maybe they weren't as present in their childhood as they were in like mine and I think yours. Like you'd seen sort of like paparazzi photos of the Olsen twins, and like obviously they had had some like ups and downs in the public eye, like when they were teenagers or in their young, like early 20s. And then I would say only in the last like year or 2 years has it truly popped off in terms of like online conversation. And now with like the sort of controversy around the sample sale that the row just had and like all of the videos and content that just came out of that, I would say it's like having a bit of a moment.
Would you talk about the controversy for the uninitiated around the sample sale?
For sure. So the row had a sample sale, which a lot of luxury designers do in New York, which is where they like sell off their um inventory. They usually have like a brick and mortar location, but they don't have like a sale rack in a traditional sense with like an H&M or a Zara would. So the sample sale is like really an opportunity for people who maybe don't want to spend like the ticket price to actually buy a piece. But the sample sale, like a lot of sample sales in New York, usually has like lineups around the block. And so these videos started to go viral when people were paying people to like camp out in the line for them. They were spending like 24 hours waiting to get into the sample sale. The sample sale ended up not being that good, but people bought stuff anyway. But they were coming out and doing these hauls of like very basic, like wool sweaters, normal bags, white t-shirts, and they had spent like $1,100 or something on these items. And so people were like, this is such a scam. Like this brand is just ripping people off while not really understanding that like that's kind of what the Rose shtick is about, is that they're like very into discretion, into like minimalism and into like, you know, targeting a luxury audience. But it was just kind of a funny moment of people being outraged at the prices and also people evangelizing the brand and being like, yeah, I love this plain black sweater that I just bought for $800. So
Yeah, it's a clash of the worlds insofar as in what I was seeing on YouTube, a lot of it was like, oh, it's really if you know, you know. Um, and those kinds of things carry so much social capital and so much clout within those circles. But then once you're exposed to the outside of it, you start to realize it doesn't have the same cachet. You start to realize how ridiculous those status symbols are, because ultimately all status symbols are socially constructed, right? So when you are confronted with objectively those things not being that valuable, it can be really, really difficult. And personally, I'm not very much a fashion girly. I feel like I spend a lot of time around those circles of people who are very like tapped in, and I feel sometimes like I'm in like a play. And I know it's because it's all going over my head, but I still am a bit like, I don't get it. Was this the first time that people had seen the stuff from the row, like who are outside of that kind of world?
I think that that's what it was. I also think it's coming at a time where obviously like a recession is looming in North America. And it's also at a time where like people are getting really angry at luxury influencers, even and these like overt displays of wealth. And so I think that people were like, you know, what do you mean that's an $800 black sweater in this economy? And so, yeah, the absurdity, the kind of like the end of Rome, this kind of money like being dropped on clothing that's that simple. And I also think that people online feel like when they see people who do have wealth, they really want to see it be spent in a way that they would also spend that money. And I think you see
Yeah.
a lot of people in comment sections say, oh, I love when people rich right, when rich people rich right. And it's like,
Yeah.
I think that they were riching wrong, basically.
So two things I want to say in response to that is I don't follow Becca Bloom, for instance, but I have seen her as a central feature in a lot of social commentators coming on and saying the economic situation is so bad for everybody that we're currently in this backlash against aspirational influencers where people just can no longer take these extravagant displays of wealth when so many people are struggling so heavily, and how people are now moving on from aspirational to educational influencers wherein people find content because they want to learn something. I mean, obviously you've already built your own following, but I find all of your videos so interesting. Another thing that I was going to say is America is very much, by the fact of its size, I know you're Canadian, but it's not a monolith. And the coastal elites are so disconnected from the general population. There's such a huge variety of experiences. And yeah, because of the disappearing middle class and the economic situation, it's really, really coming to a head. And I think you're right, we're going to see that play out on social media. But you hadn't been following the brand. You said you were aware of it from when the Olsen sisters set it up, but you hadn't been following it like with each collection or with each store opening. It wasn't in your consciousness.
It wasn't in my consciousness, but I definitely saw it and was aware of it as a luxury brand in the same way that I'm aware of, like, maybe you've seen the Chanel Subway show. Like, I don't follow Chanel as a brand, but I'm aware of that recent show. I was aware that the Row does shows and they don't allow cell phones as like a pillar of luxury design. And also as like having seen it from its release, and it is interesting that it took on its own life as a brand that's separate to its owners, which I think is really rare for celebrity brands. Like I think that when people purchase something from the Row, they're purchasing it for a different reason that you purchase something like Rhode or Rare Beauty. I think that you purchase the celebrity product because you want to feel like closer to the celebrity, or it's like, shortening the gap between yourself and them. But the Row, I think people do purchase it just because it's a luxury designer brand and not because it's owned by the Olsen twins.
As I was doing my research into the Row, and it seems like they often went into interviews as well in the beginning saying, we don't want this to be our brand. In fact, we'd rather people not be part of it. The cynical side of me thinks that's a huge marketing strategy, because in terms of like parasocial relationships, what really interests me is the less you know about someone, the more you can fill in the gaps. Having such little information about these girls means that we can imagine their lives outside of what we see. And that doesn't exist for people like Hailey Bieber or Kylie Jenner, who have to document every second of their day because digital intimacy is part of their brand. And they've made that closeness part of their marketing strategy. But also, I think the step away from the limelight, like it makes me quite, I don't know, I think we need to stop feeling like we are involved with these celebrities and projecting our own experiences onto them. But the Olsen twins seem quite elusive, but quite almost like unhappy.
Yeah. I've been thinking about that one in particular. I really don't think they are. I'm not in some sort of judgmental way. I think that from such a young age, being surrounded by that much positive public opinion can probably feel the same as being misunderstood, in the same way that criticism can feel like you're being misunderstood. I think that are only able to achieve that kind of like it girl status and that kind of like aloof, transcendent feel to them because they were surrounded by people who needed to respect them as like a source of income. Like they were so merchandised. Like, and those movies were so different than, say, somebody like Dakota Fanning or Elle Fanning, who were child actors. Like they were really child's brand machines, And so the adults around them would have had to like kind of prop them up as they were developing throughout their childhood and their adolescence. That I think that you would be broken by it, which a lot of child stars are, or you would need to transcend it and just kind of let all of the criticism and the compliments go down the same pipe. So they may be artistically fulfilled because it seems like The Row is a project that they're very involved in, but like personally fulfilled, at least from like the photos that we've seen of them, I don't think that that's the case.
I was thinking about this about child stars, but specifically them because they seem quite isolated. A lot of child stars that we know, like the Disney Channel stars, they existed in the atmosphere of their studios. So like a lot of them would socialize with each other, for instance, like Selena Gomez and Demi Lovato and the Jonas Brothers and Miley Cyrus, whatever. But as you said, they were very much their own standalone brand machines. I don't know, I was looking at videos of them, of course, and I was thinking, like, I can't imagine being that close to someone in my life because their twin is the only person who can really understand the circumstances that they're in. And I hadn't thought of that. You're right. In each of their movies as well, they don't have other characters to embody. So even artistically, they are very much commodifying themselves. When I was growing up, the things I remember is that they were very notably dating people who were a lot older than them. And if you are commodifying yourself and working from such a young age and you're not surrounded by other children to socialize with, I'm not going to pretend like I had any insight on the dynamics of their relationships, but it didn't surprise me that they sought out people who were a lot older. It made a lot of sense to me that they would be in those kinds of dynamics even as young women. I'd really like to talk about as well the quiet luxury. I've seen so much of your brand analysis and I think it's really interesting, especially in the political or economic context that we're in. You already mentioned the recession that we're not talking about that is a recession. What do you think this resurgence of like quiet luxury is?
It's tough. I think that it's a couple different things, but to me, the biggest convergence of like material and value happened during like the streetwear era, like when like Supreme was selling $400 cotton t-shirts. Traditionally, an item was worth more because it was made with materials that cost more to produce and to manufacture. And during that time period, like people were spending what, like $1,000 on like a brick or whatever, which is like a marketing tactic in itself. The value of an item and the amount that people were paying for it, like absolutely converged. And during the rise of like fast fashion and online influencer era, clothes only needed to be manufactured for like 1 or 2 days when you wear it for photos. And so material did not matter whatsoever. Like you could, in theory, buy a coat with the same cut as the row from Fashion Nova, and you can't tell immediately that it's Fashion Nova from a photo. But when you're up close and you see the material, you can tell that it's made by luxury designers or luxury producers. And so I think that the if you know, you know marketing needed to become so much more granular and like subtle. I also think that during this sort of time period, because of like the backlash that people are sharing online during like the recession, it's probably a bad idea for rich people to be wearing a ton of brand names, you know? Like I think that people are really exhausted by it. And I think that quiet luxury is also a way of sort of like flying under the radar, but still making that statement to the people around you, like your peers, that would be able to recognize it. Which I think is why people get so angry in particular at the row, because it's minimalism, but it's extravagant minimalism. It's self-referential in a way that's like kind of sinister. Like they're like, we of course need to still be presenting as rich, but you know, I'm not going to wear a Gucci hoodie or whatever. I'm going to wear a plain black sweater, in which you need to, of course, signal to your peers that you're above everything else, but you need to be so covert and fly under the radar that you're not the topic of fire.
What I find really funny, especially in England, because everything is extremely class coded, is that a lot of people who have a lot less money are buying copies on Shein of the row, trying to signal old money, but then people who do have a lot of money are cosplaying at being less wealthy. I, for instance, grew up around people who had a lot of privilege. And what I find so funny is the like co-opting of language, of brands, of ways of dressing that would signal that they would have less money. And I didn't necessarily connect it to the recession, but it does make sense. We came of age after 2008. I used to have a boyfriend who was extremely privileged. He kept on really trying to convince me that he was like salt of the earth. And he was like, no, I really get it because I had this haircut when I was 13. I think this really intentional signaling on both sides of trying to enter a class, you know, either by wearing a dupe or taking on words into your vernacular is so fascinating to me. Everybody is so hyper aware of these different like signals of status and wealth and class. And I think it's been amplified massively by social media. I would like to get more into the fact that the row, it's very intentionally distanced from the Olsen twins. Why is it that you think that so many celebrities seem to have their own brands these days and they can't just rest their laurels on their creative practice, whether it be singing or acting, and they have to become brands?
I think it's a natural extension. Like Ariana Grande, I'm sure she's a singer, she's an artist, but like, does she have a artistic practice, or is she like very talented at a particular thing and has a brand built around her, like as a result? I think that it's a money-making scheme, essentially. Like, I don't think the idea is like build a brand and then sell it to Estee Lauder or whatever. We already have this level of fame, and so why not take advantage of it? It's just like diversifying their income, I think.
What's interesting is that a lot of these people who were initially just famous for being famous, for instance, the Kardashians or Hailey Bieber, started a brand to kind of legitimize themselves. This is a very cruel interpretation, but kind of legitimize themselves as a business person or as a beauty leader. Whereas in contrast, the Olsen twins had already done that and then made the transition to being in the background.
One of the questions that you also shared was, what do you think is like really so appealing about them?
Yeah.
And I think that what's appealing is like they do kind of tend to balance the line of what women in 2025 probably want. They are already famous and independently wealthy, but they have a fulfilling career. It's a career that most women would want, but that's also respected by men. They are business owners, but they're also creative. They're able to be fashion girlies. They occupy this really, really niche space of being intellectuals while also being aesthetic, which a lot of women don't necessarily have the balance. A lot of women are models and a lot of women are like professors. You know, it's like they don't overlap a whole lot. Obviously, there are exceptions, but just like in terms of the archetypes that like women traditionally are given to choose from, they occupy a pretty unique space there. And I would say that a lot of these people who are famous for being famous, going back to what you were saying about like Hailey Bieber and Kim Kardashian, like maybe legitimizing themselves with brands. Like I think for the Olsen twins, it kind of happened in reverse for them because they were merchandised from such a young age. And the Row is not merch, where like I would consider Rode and Skims to be more merch of the celebrity than actually distinct brand.
I would argue that Emily Ratajkowski
Yeah.
tried to occupy that space and just got absolutely ridiculed for it. And I think it makes me uncomfortable that I was talking to a bunch of people about Zohran Mamdani being elected as mayor, and they had said, remember that time, because Cynthia Nixon, who was in Sex and the City, tried to run for mayor a few years ago. And during that time, apparently on Twitter, someone had made a joke. The reason that they knew that she was selfish or something is because she didn't return a sexual favor to someone on the show. And I was like, that irritates me so much. The US president is a reality star turned politician. And there's so much undertone in that joke of, you were an actress, we've seen your boobs, we've seen you naked, and therefore you can't be a public intellectual. And the same thing happened in a much more obvious way to Emily Ratajkowski. I haven't read her book, to be honest, but I have read a lot of the backlash around it. I think also what was sad about that is that a lot of women especially were uncomfortable with allowing her to occupy that space because they were like, you already have everything that you could ever want in this area of life. You can't be respected for another thing. That was really sad. And then in terms of the Olsen sisters, when I was doing my research into this, they were going through all of the interior designing and all of the artwork associated with the Row and how they've managed to market it without marketing it insofar as their social channels or just highlighting other artists and interior designers. I think that's a beautiful concept, and I think it really does differentiate them. They're very good at what they do, and I think it's a genius marketing tactic they're allowing themselves to explore. Something they obviously are really passionate about. Nonetheless, I don't think, Susan down the road could start a fashion brand and have this much hype around it. And then that balancing act between, we are not associated with it, but you kind of know. They were talking about how a lot of the store locations are inspired by things in their lives. So the LA store location was an old hairdresser that they used to go to when they were younger. So that even though they were like, oh, we're not keeping this close to us, you still have that sense, that sneaky sense of feeling closer to them and feeling like you're getting a part of their lives because of it. It's such a difficult one because I want to talk about these things and I want to be frank, but I don't want it to come off as though I'm criticizing them because they're obviously amazing businesswomen. I said this in one of my questions, like, do you think this work of cultural analysis has made you
More cynical?
more cynical?
I like need to often take breaks, like tolerance breaks, basically. And I think that in general, especially in these fashion spheres, like because fashion cultural authority is so decentralized now that a lot of people come online and they adopt this really snarky, authoritative tone as to like what's in, what's out, whether or not they have the credentials for that at all. And I find myself, because I'm like swore I'm like a hater. I try not to make videos when I'm like emotionally irritated at a topic, or if I am feeling cynical about it, I try and maybe take a step back and ask myself what that's revealing about myself. But I think it is really easy to, if you do cultural analysis regularly, to, get cynical and sort of like disappointed. But the online world reflects our lives, and that's life in general, is that sometimes you're going to be disappointed and sometimes you're going to feel empowered by it. But I do try specifically in the videos that I make to go into it with a very calculated mood. Like I do only film when I'm in the moods that I think is like appropriate to share to other people. Because if I'm feeling bad and cynical, that's not what I want to convey. I think that like people can feel empowered and optimistic about cultural analysis online. And people can also feel really bummed out about it. And I don't want to bum people out.
It's really interesting that you say about like the authoritative voice, because of course people want to establish their own credibility. And they do so by being a hater. They do so by sounding confident.
Yeah.
It's to present yourself in a certain way because you want to sound professional and you want to have that credibility.
Yeah.
Everybody has this really curated authoritative voice, and it is because of this idea of like personal branding, which I find so sinister. Because I'm like, when did you start to commodify yourself to such an aggressive extent that this is something that goes through your mind all the time? And you have to curate the way that you show up, not only online, but in your personal interactions to align with the brand that you're trying to build.
The reading comprehension at times in the TikTok comment section is at 0. Did you watch this with your eyes and listen to it with your ears? Like it's bizarre. Sometimes it's the first thing that you see when you wake up in the morning is like somebody calling you stupid. Like on a comment. I know that I shouldn't do this, but at times I'll like fight back to it because I'm like, you know what? If you come on my page and you say something shitty in a shitty tone, like you're going to get that energy back. And I think that that's true on the internet in general, is that like what you put out, you do get back. And if you put out this authoritative, snarky tone, they will turn on you eventually. Because if you build a brand off of being shitty and snarky, it's inevitably going to crumble.
All right, let's set the scene. It's 2017. You are pushing 30 years old and have just watched the finale of Pretty Little Liars. You're wearing your feathered earrings and your red coat, and you swore you'd never watch this show again.
Countless hours spent on message boards researching conspiracies. Time you will never get back.
Okay, so fast forward to 2023, and you call yourself a teen drama aficionado. Just finished a podcast dissecting every salacious episode of Gossip Girl, and you're looking for something to fill the void. Your listeners begged you for years, yes, years, to cover Pretty Little Liars on your podcast network, and for once, you're considering it. Hell, you're geared to do it, making you, well, a liar.
Liars. At last, We Are Liars podcast was born. I'm Michelle.
And I'm Liz.
And we're Total Betty Podcast Network, and we recap every single episode, spoiler-free, of Pretty Little Liars ad nauseum. Every exaggerated gasp, inappropriate relationship, and altogether fantasy this show holds.
Listen every Wednesday to We Are Liars as I, Liz, the veteran, and Michelle Newby talk spoiler-free about the wildness that is Pretty Little Liars.
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
It makes me spooked as well because the word of this year was rage baiting.
Yeah.
And I get so much content coming up on my For You page, which is telling me about how to hook people in. People won't comment to agree with you, but people will comment to correct you.
100%.
And so a lot of creators or creative coaches will come on and be like, you have to say something that is kind of intentionally wrong, or you have to try and piss people off to get them to engage. And that is such a dangerous way to seek out human communication. This sounds really silly, but it's changed the way that I watch other people's content insofar as when I was watching stuff about the Row, I was hearing them mispronounce words that they hadn't mispronounced before. And in my head, I was like, I think you might have done that so that someone will be like, it's actually pronounced like this. Yeah. But that's what I mean. It is so cynical of me to think that everything is a marketing strategy, to think that everything plays into the attention economy. But it's also given me a sharper lens watching other people's content to be like, oh, this was done on purpose. this is why it's structured this way. Anyway, to go back to the row. So I went to school in New York, and I often on my explore pages get a lot of the row coming up on meme pages. I'm talking about like the fake Rothko, like Nolita Dirtbag, starter packs of NYC. And it seems to be, it's reflective very much of a certain type of person. I wanted to know what your thoughts were on that as well.
Do you mean like, do I think it's intentional that like it's included in this meme sphere, or
Do you think it's intentional, but also what kind of person do you think they're trying to describe?
I think that I have a pretty clear idea of like the person that they're trying to describe, which is like, you know, an upwardly mobile, independently wealthy, or like has parents that are supporting her, or married to somebody that's in tech, or that works at like Anthropic or whatever, wants to straddle the line between being an intellectual and being a fashion girly, I would say. Like somebody who is educated, but also somebody who is like very focused on their appearance. And it's like, listen, I am saying this, but I also, if I was in that tax bracket, would probably buy the row. I am 2 levels down from like their target audience. I like the rose aesthetic, and I relate to it as like somebody who does work at like a white collar job and like goes into an office. I understand why women have the desire to dress in muted tones and baggy silhouettes as they get older. That all makes sense to me. I think that the thing that sets the row apart from a plain black sweater is just the price tag, right? That's where it gets into a very specific niche group of people, and that's when it gets kind of like absurd. I think that it's probably kind of intentional, because I think that a lot of those brands can be kind of tongue in cheek. People are saying the row is all about discretion, no phones, limited, like 4 locations, very limited height. Maybe it makes me cynical, but I do think that that's a marketing tactic in itself. And I think it gets memes because it's kind of like a smirking marketing tactic. You know what I mean? It is kind of like aware of the absurdity. And maybe that's why it's something that's like more easily memed than a brand like Kate Spade.
I was just thinking this. There's a lot of stuff about post-irony culture and how there are so many levels of irony that it's very difficult for Gen Z to appreciate what's earnest. And I like the idea, and correct me if this isn't what you meant, but I like the idea of a tongue-in-cheek marketing campaign where it knows that the prices are outrageous, but it also relies on the fact that you're going to buy it anyway, and you're going to also know that it's slightly outrageous. And this kind of, to me, relates to this layers of irony insofar as I'm still willing to put the money down to be part of it, even with this underlying understanding that it is a bit ridiculous.
Yeah.
One thing that's shown up a lot on my Instagram, and I'd love to know your thoughts on it, is the idea of the capsule wardrobe and elevated basics. It's very sad to see because it's co-opting what I feel was originally like an underconsumption core tenet of like, you don't need that much. And this relates slightly to what you said about price used to reflect quality.
Yeah.
And I love the idea, and this is something that I'm trying to go with in my own life. I love the idea of investing in something that is going to be lifelong. For instance, Patagonia, you pay the price, but you know that in the future, you can bring it back no matter what time, and you can get it repaired for free. And I really, really enjoy the idea of like fixing things and getting things that are high quality so that they last you through the seasons. And the fact that's been co-opted by social media influencers or fashion brands that aren't necessarily selling that to you in terms of longevity, but they're selling it to you as a status symbol instead, with the understanding that you're going to buy this black t-shirt not because it will be part of your basic wardrobe and it will last you forever, but so you can add it to your collection of like 17 other black t-shirts. And it kind of breaks my heart. So I wanted to know whether you would come to that same conclusion, if that's me being cynical, or what you had been thinking about that as well.
I think that the idea of a capsule wardrobe is related to that. Like, yeah, it's idea of investing in like long lasting pieces. I've been seeing that over the past like couple of years where it's like buy it nice or buy it twice, right? I never see that working in practice because ultimately I think a lot of the people who like myself included are obsessed with the idea of a capsule wardrobe are also like kind of addicted to shopping and like kind of addicted to like consuming things. And so buy it nice or buy it twice. You're not buying something really, at least I don't. You're not buying something truly to like integrate it into the wardrobe and then when it's done and it's in there and the capsule wardrobe is done, you'll be happy. The whole idea of the consumption cycle of fashion and clothing is that it's never done. And you will always be sold on another thing and another thing and another thing. For example, all everybody has been wearing all black for 20 years. Now all white is in. All black is the new all white. So it's like even if you invest in these pieces that you think are like basic and you can trust them, something is going to change. And so I also think that a capsule wardrobe is probably another way that the wealthy cosplay like lower income because having a capsule wardrobe is just having less. Like, where are you putting the rest of your wardrobe in your house? You're really not getting rid of that stuff. I think it's just another ploy, kind of like Marie Kondoing, where it positions itself as like anti-consumption, but it is part of the consumption cycle. It's like you need to declutter so you can make room for more shit later. So I think a capsule wardrobe is like a really good idea in theory, but I think it doesn't make sense in like our current culture because advertising doesn't end. You're always going to be exposed to desire. And so when you think you're done, you're never done.
I'm so glad that we got onto that because I was trying to formulate that thought and you've really summarized it in a good way. Maybe it's because I'm earning more money as an adult, or it's because I've entered into an age where I'm exposed to different types of advertising. But I think this emphasis on quality that's come up a lot more recently has me quite irked because a lot of these higher brands, because of the consumption cycle, they know that they're not going to be worn for a long time.
Yeah.
So they've put less and less into the production.
Yeah.
The reason why they were able to stay around for so long
Yeah.
was because of what was previously hailed as very good quality. Now, no one needs to do that because the cycles of fashion and the cycles of consumption are so much faster that by the time you get rid of it to make room for that other new black t-shirt, that shirt could have fallen apart. To go back to the Olsen twins.
Yeah.
To me, they were like the ultimate cool girl, and they still are, even though they're not part of the cultural conversation. Every single appearance they have is just extremely chic.
Yeah.
Even in like very unchic situations, there are photos of them like squatting on the side of the road in Soho in their big sunglasses, smoking, and I'm like, that looks incredible and you look so good. I don't like talking about, women's bodies, how they look, but like they don't look very healthy. They don't look very happy. And so I'm so confused about how they've managed to maintain this mystique for such a long time. And even their small appearances, they make such big impacts. I think one of the notes that I made was the video during COVID of one of the twins walking through the woods with a machete and how that went like super viral. And I still think of that every once in a while, like that is who I would like to be. So I wanted to know what your thoughts were on like capturing the public attention in such minimal moments and for so long.
I think that in general, in our culture, especially over the past like 5 or 6 years, I would say like everybody wants to see somebody who's like unbothered, because we live in this like panopticon. Everybody really appreciates when somebody doesn't really give a fuck about what their public opinion is. And I think that because they were probably propped up by all of the adults around them that were making money off of them, they were told from the moment that they were children that like they're the it girl. You know what I mean? Like you are the moment always. Just to be able to like balance that much attention, I think that you do have to have this kind of like Iron Man level self-esteem where you do know that you are the moment, like inherently. As a result of that, you can make your own decisions without a lot of outside influence. And although the average person, people don't really like when they make their own decisions and have their own opinions, I think that people do want to see it in the Olsen twins. Like they were doing the minimalism look, like they've been doing the row look for a long time, regardless of what was in fashion or what was in style. They were able to sort of make their own creative decisions about what they were wearing and how they were presenting themselves. So I think that people really love seeing this like nonchalance seeing somebody who's confident enough to make clear decisions in their external appearance. I think that also the thinness in our culture is not only a sign of wealth, but it's also a sign of like a center of control that can never be taken away from you. I think that it's a symbol of discipline, especially like in a culture surrounded by excess, that you can have everything and you choose to not have it. And that kind of internal confidence, people really, I think they don't understand it and they revere it.
Yeah, the self-deprivation
Yeah.
of thinness is really something that people revere and admire, which is a difficult one and one that I don't really wish to get into, and I don't think you do either. I think we need to discuss that more. Another thing that I want to talk about as well, and I had written this before, and this isn't something that I had necessarily thought about much until I was structuring this episode, is the Hollywood obsession with twins.
Yeah.
Especially with child stars, I think. There were a lot of appearances of twins. For me, the idea would be because it made for really easy, especially in things like sitcoms or children's shows, you could make one twin the representation of one thing and another twin the representation of another. Maybe I was very socially inept as a child. I am as an adult also. But watching things like Zach and Cody, I remember as a child not registering that they were two different stereotypes. And now I watch it as an adult and I'm like, oh no, that's the premise of the whole show, is that Cody is this sweet, sensitive, articulate academic one, whereas Zach is the like boisterous, precocious young man. I think that's rich material for writing. But was there anything else that you were thinking about twins and how they age?
I had written down mischievous and like as a narrative device basically as well. Like I think that in general, like it's like the Jekyll and Hyde, the mischievous and the good one, like good and evil. They're like a very easy way to write in diversity into your characters. I think that in general, it's just like a novelty that people enjoy looking at. And I think that brands love it too. Like there are so many influencers that are twins. The influencers that are twins, I think have like a leg up in terms of branding because it's just people, you know, like they're like, oh my God, look, they look the same. And they're both wearing Abercrombie or whatever. I think it's something like people enjoy looking at. I also think that when we talk about siblings but not twins, like you mentioned the Francos and like the Fannings, I think that from a studio perspective, I can see why people would love that because you don't have to explain who some random new up and coming actor is if it's James Franco's younger hot brother. Like that's way easier for us as consumers to wrap our head around because we already know this one person, so it's going to be way easier adoption to sell through another person. So I can understand from that perspective. And from us, it's just like less work, right? Like we don't have to get used to another person. We can assign them each other's like characteristics. And yeah, I think it's just like a natural kind of novelty that people are drawn towards.
What I'm really impressed by in terms of siblings but not twins is how far removed Elizabeth Olsen seems brand-wise to her sisters.
That I've seen a mention of her recently was talking about the row. Actually, I saw a interview that she did. I forget, she has a film coming out or something. And she was kind of defending the row in an interview where she was like, of course I wear the row. Like, why wouldn't I? She was kind of being a brand evangelist for her sister's clothing brand, which is of course natural, but it's the only time that I've seen her make any reference to the rest of her family.
Yeah, it's really interesting because she's very much established herself as and she does look like her sisters. Like there is a family resemblance, but they don't appear together necessarily. And there's a very intentional distance between the three of them. And I don't want to meditate on their relationship at all because who the fuck knows? That's another thing that I can't stand is people are like, oh, well, they're not very close. And I'm like, how would you know? Like, how would you know? But it's interesting. And it's also like great that she's managed to have her own career beyond that. What made me so sad is when people were talking about the Jonas brothers' youngest brother and referring to him as the bonus Jonas. I'm the last child of 4. When they talk about houses or like flats that they used to live in when they were younger and I wasn't around, like I get jealous. Can you imagine if they were talking about like stadium tours? Another question that I was really excited to ask you. Do you think fashion and or style is an inherently individual pursuit or enterprise, or it's more of a communal activity?
I asked my boyfriend about this yesterday as well. Like we were having pillow talk, and I was like, "Do you think it's like individual or communal?" Because I was thinking about your question. Um, I do think inherently it is a communal activity, but it can be. It's obviously like represents individually, but I don't think it's individualistic. I think that I see a lot of fashion girlies on TikTok who are like, "I only dress for myself," and I don't 100% buy that because I dress for my personal comfort and my personal style, yeah, but, like, to be oblivious of, like, people's external reactions to you, I think is near impossible. Also, the only reason that something is a trend, the only reason that something is popular or, like, widely adopted is because, it's a communal experience. I think it's one of the only sort of ways of showing your status externally other than, like, your house and your car, and that's why people give so much credence to fashion. Like people say, oh, it's like an art form or it's just clothing or whatever, but it occupies such a unique space for us, like psychologically, that I think that it has to be communal because like we are communal.
The choices that you make can't ever be separated from the context in which you make them. We've spoken about quality and longevity. So the last thing I'm going to do is ask you to talk about your platform and your channel. You've got such an interesting channel speaking about how people buy certain brands and how this signals cultural shifts and hierarchies. And I wanted to know why you got interested in this to begin with.
I was a really online kid. Like I have older siblings, but I was raised as like an only child, and my parents, particularly my mom, is quite an early adopter of technology. So I had like pretty like filtered access to the internet from a relatively young age. So I've been online for a long time. I work as a producer in social media content. So I kind of understand like how the sausage is made like most of the time in terms of like it was an easy transition to filming my own content at home. I think that in general, like I love thinking really deeply about things, like in a way that's like a little intense. And like I'll get a lot of comments that are like, it's not that deep, it's not that deep. But I feel like
And you're like, yes, it is.
yes, it is. Like you're just not thinking critically enough. But it's a really comforting thought to me when I can decide why something is happening. Like when I look at something online, I don't accept things at face value very often, I think. And
Mm-hmm.
because of that, I can look a little bit deeper. And I'm pretty decisive. I can reach conclusions and then stick to them. So I think that that makes me relatively suited to being really loud and opinionated on the internet, basically. But I love doing it. It's something that I really enjoy doing. I think the internet itself has sort of become like a multi-level marketing scheme where like everybody's kind of like trying to make money and like
Yes.
hyping each other up. And the more that I do it, the more I'm like, I really appreciate the things that this is giving me that aren't monetary. Like I love coming online and seeing somebody comment something in a way that's so intelligent and succinct that I could never say. And it makes me feel like because I'm comfortable being on camera and maybe I was acting as a little bit of a vehicle for like positive internet interaction. That's a great feeling to me. And I also love being able to meet people like you and having conversations about things that like we're both like, I saw that too. Like I love that feeling of community and kind of like recognition.
I was like talking about like, oh, and at this point I've only gotten this amount of listens and this about or whatever. And he's like, yeah, but you enjoy doing it. I've never seen you more animated. Like it brings me joy to satiate my curiosity and also have a reason to conclude my thoughts and like connect them to something in like a way that I find satisfying. Because I often have a lot of disjointed thoughts about why things happen, and having a reason to sit down and put them together. I think as well, like you said, the media literacy is so low. My biggest example of this is the Vogue is having a boyfriend embarrassing, and everybody responded to it. No one read the fucking article. You can tell that no one read the article because the article is not as sharp or as interesting as the title was. I think it's a really, really good concept, but I don't think she got to the meat of the gender dynamics and everything that could have been discussed. And people read the title and they fucking ran with it, and it became this like micro event. but it was nothing to do with the actual points that were put forward. Like you say, someone will watch a video and within 5 seconds, they assume everything that you're about to say.
Yeah.
And then they respond without taking the extra second to realize you might be joking, or you're about to contradict yourself, or about to add some nuance, or about to complicate that thought and like reach a conclusion that's slightly separate than what you had set out to do, and share how you got to that conclusion.
Yep.
And so you have to do it for the love of the game rather than for what it brings you, because a lot of the time, like, you're so right, it's a multi-level marketing scheme and only the people at the very top are making a lot. And a lot of the time you're going to be posting into a void and nothing's going to happen.
Yeah.
Where do you find your ideas? Like, what motivates you to post?
By looking at like a bunch of different sources. I think that like the biggest thing for me is like, I don't know if you get this too, but like sometimes when you have like a big hitter, you're like, oh my God, I'm never going to come up with an idea again. Like that was my last one. Like that
was it.
I find it important to, particularly if you're doing cultural analysis on my Substack, all of the essays, people doing 30,000 feet looking down cultural analysis on things, and I can read that, but actually the best ideas come from when you're viewing things as a consumer. So I try to like maybe take a tolerance break, reset my algorithm a little bit, and then ideas and patterns will start to appear to you again. And also being, after you've done it for a while, you start to be more confident that like, okay, an idea will come. Like just because I don't have one right now doesn't mean that in like, you know, the next 2 hours I'll see something and be like, I need to talk about that immediately. So yeah, it comes relatively organically, and if it's not coming, just wait, basically. But honestly, like that's another thing that this gives you is the privilege to conclude your thoughts, and then it makes room for new ones. Like as soon as I make a video, I'm like, okay, that one's done. Whereas like if I wasn't making the videos, I would just be like ruminating on them for a year.
Everybody always says like you have to keep creating, you have to keep publishing. That's how you're going to get your momentum and build a portfolio, whatever you want to do. And it's so interesting how that's shifted since when I was a teenager. We were getting people come to our school, stand on the stage and be like, never ever publish anything online.
Yeah.
Now people I admire and creators are like, yeah, you're on the right track. If you just keep on publishing random shit, like you're going to get a big hit and then something's going to happen. It's so weird. It's so weird. Okay, final question. Who is your current celebrity crush?
It's always the same, and it's Adam Driver. It's been like that since girls. Like he is my celebrity boyfriend OG, and I have a recurring fantasy every night pretty much where he's my landlord and I can't pay rent that month.
No.
And it's like, honestly, it's like my sleeper agent activation. Like as soon as I think about it, I just like my whole body relaxes. Like I love Adam Driver, and I have a whole imaginary life with him. So, and it's just
Oh my God, I love that.
I love asking people what their is too. I'm like, what do you think about before you go to sleep at night?
Mine is being like a Bonnie and Clyde duo with Cillian Murphy.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Thanks so much for joining us. Please give us a good rating if you're able, and if you hated it, then you literally don't have to listen ever again. With special thanks to my interviewee and everyone else who made this possible, including the friends that gave me the deluded confidence and equipment to record these episodes. Everything stated in these episodes are solely opinions and should not at all be taken as fact. Bye!